Hello there, my name is Dr. Salim Javed. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at Linga's Lalita Devi Institute of Management and Sciences. As you know that we have been talking about different story formats under the title of Understanding Cinema, and we have been talking about Denwell's 7 plot point story format, which you can see on your screen, which is on one side it is presented in a linear fashion, and on the other side it is presented in a non-linear fashion. And the strength of this particular format is its non-linearity, and we have talked at length about this. Now, if you remember, we also talked about how, other than this non-linear format, Wells has suggested 5 other different points which were characters. We talked about it at length, where we discussed about round, dynamic, flat, static and stock characters. Then we talked about how rich environment plays an important role in the believability of a narrative structure. Then we talked about subplot also, but I'll be talking about this at length today. Then we talked about ice monster prologue, try and fail cycles. As we were talking about subplot, if you remember that if you are the protagonist, then need is the plot element. The protagonist's ultimate motive is revealed here, setting the stage for the rest of the narrative. So plot, makes the story interesting. Plot makes the story interesting. And then if one or more spot is being understood by a lot of other things also, one subplot is the most common element. Plot and subplot is the most common element in the story. Let's understand these 4 story structures. Now, one part belongs to action, then the second part is characterized in character format. Let's see how action-wise it is working and how action-wise it is not working. In terms of action, if you see it happening on your screen, that in terms of action there are there are cities. Like Neo is an underachiever, then Neo learns about the Matrix, agent kidnaps Neo, then you have Neo escapes the Matrix, then Morpheus is captured, Neo becomes the one, Neo defeats the agent. Now this is one line of subplot. The second line of subplot, or you can say that this is the main story, that there is a character called Neo who is an underachiever and who becomes the one in the world of Matrix. Then the second subplot will be a character where Neo is an underachiever. Then you have Neo meets Morpheus, then Neo meets Oracle, then Oracle's tell Morpheus that about Neo, that Neo is not the one. Then in terms of character, then Neo proves himself that he is the one. Then later on, when you realize that Oracle is meeting Morpheus, then there are a lot of other things. So in terms of, one is in terms of action, the other is in terms of character, and you get to see, you get to meet a lot of other things also. Now, if on one hand you have action, on the other hand you have character, then in majority of the films you have also the subplot of romance. Like for instance, in terms of Matrix, Neo is alone when the film opens, then Neo meets Trinity during the process, then Trinity is not interested in Neo, then Neo falls in love with Trinity. Trinity would not open up, Neo thinks that she is in love with someone else. Neo risks his life to save Morpheus and Trinity, and finally Trinity falls in love with Neo. Now in terms of betrayal, like suppose if there is an action subplot, look, there is a story, then there is a plot. I always say that plot is the need, and then in need you have different categories. One, as I have discussed, is action, the other is character, then the third is romance, and fourth is a betrayal. And in the same way you can find out a lot of other themes also, like in betrayal theme, if you have seen Matrix, there is a character called Cypher. So Cypher, in the beginning of the story, Cypher is just like any other crew member. They are friends. Then Cypher makes a deal with the agent. Then crew discovers an unauthorized trip into the matrix. Then Cypher tells the agent where they are, and then Neo, spot the trap and they try to escape. Then Cypher attacks his crew members in the real world, and ultimately Cypher betrays Morpheus and kills the crew. Now, if you remember that when we were talking about hook, plot turn 1, pinch 1, midpoint, pinch point 2, plot turn 2, and resolution. Now all these things, when you have a format, then you have different categories of subplots, and then you put elements in those categories in 4, 5 or 6, depending how complicated your film is, or how if your film is a simple linear narrative structure. So it depends on all the things, whether they are, what kind of a story you have woven. Complex the story, the way, if you make your story complex, then one of the best ways to make your story complex is having subplots. Like, for an example, suppose if there is a film where you are talking about history, then you bring that film into contemporary world, and then in the contemporary world you suppose have 2 generations. Now, first of all, if it is a historical film, like be that Tumbad or be that lot of similar films, or any horror film, it becomes very, very important to establish the historical context, and then you weave it in such a way that maybe the child is young when he is experiencing the entire story, and then when he grows, when he becomes a grown up, he lives that story, and maybe he has got one more generation to explain that story to. Maybe it is between this generation and the coming generation that the matter is resolved. So in this way, when you have a lot of subplots, then it becomes, and it is not necessarily that as it has been put in categories, in the same way it will be coming in the film. A lot of, like Cypher's example, which is a betrayal storyline of a film. Now, in terms of Cypher is placed very strategically in the story whenever the crisis is, whenever the crisis is to be brought in. So at that point of time, you bring Cypher. Otherwise you have romance to play up with, then you have action, a lot of action to play up with, then you have character arc and all these things. Please understand, there is one very basic difference which all these story formats have, is that they are basically helping this character to achieve its arc. Doesn't matter if it is a positive arc or a negative arc, it is like a secondary thing, but all these things are basically for the character to achieve its arc. If your character is rich in the beginning, chances are that he may be rich, not in terms of money by the end of the film, maybe in some other sense. Like if you take an example of Buddha, he was born rich, but he became, when he left this mortal world, he was then rich, but in a very spiritual sense. Now, this was one film that we have talked about, like a lot of people have asked me to give you examples. So this was one of the examples, that how on the basis of subplot you can bifurcate a film. Now, in terms of ice monster thing, and how other things, or maybe an example from other film. So let's take Titanic, which was released in 1997. Now, if you have seen the film, I think most of you have seen the film. The film starts with a vessel going underwater to find the wreck of Titanic and a large diamond necklace. Now, instead of necklace, the crew finds the picture of a woman wearing it, dating the date when Titanic sank on April 14, 1912. The lady in the picture is the survivor of the incident, and she is brought on board and she narrates the story. Now imagine that imagine a different opening altogether of the film Titanic. Now if you start that there is a ship and people are lining up to board that ship, there is nothing, or you are being asked to directly involve in the film. Now that is one of the approaches that one can opt for, but James Cameron took a very different approach. Rather than approaching the theme, he created a point of interest that though there is an exploration of a ship which sank long back, and but what is the need to go to that, to that ship? So the necklace becomes the reason. Why necklace becomes the reason, and why, how do they know where this lady exists, and all these things. So you really have to see the film to understand that there is no doubt that we will be like in terms of sales. When you read a paper where you are talking about market and marketing, so one of the rules is that you never directly, as soon as the customer is in, you never directly talk about in terms of the product. You always create an aura around that product, and then you brought product in the frame. And this is how, that is exactly the same technique which is being used in this film, that you are not directly talking about the of the title Titanic, and every look, when everybody knows that this was a ship which sank, and we undoubtedly want to really explore how it sank. That is a point of curiosity when you go to watch a film like that. But rather than directly approaching it, when you give it a reference, and when you create a hook, I always talk about hook in terms of writing. When you create a hook, and then through that hook you actually venture into your story, then it is far more powerful than having a obvious opening. Now, let's talk about hook. What is the hook? The the exposition and set, as the setup as she goes down the memory lane in 1912. The protagonist Rose, the protagonist, the actress, with her mother Ruth and her affluence, fiance Carl, boards the Titanic. The mother Ruth reminds Rose that if she marries Carl, the family's financial situation will be stable. On the other hand, our male protagonist, Jack Dawson, secures a third-class ticket to Titanic in gambling. Now, from the very, very beginning, once after the hook, once you are introduced to the world of Titanic, what sort of class strata, you have in that ship, how people are coming, what social background they have, what financial background they have, what is the hidden story, everything is being explained. Then in terms of plot, when we talk about this was the hook, that there is a lady who with her mother has come on board, there is a fiance, but you can see the distance between these two wannabe couples. Then in terms of plot turn one, the inciting incident, that as it says, the Rose is jittery over her loveless engagement with Carl and wants to end her life by jumping over the railing of the ship. As she is about to jump, Jack engages her in conversation, and she calms down. Jack and Rose develop a friendship. Now you must be wondering why I am talking about two films one after another, because when I was going through the comments, I realized that one of the comments was that kindly facilitate it with example. So that is one of the main reasons that I have brought the example. So on the one hand I have explained metrics, and on the other hand I am explaining Titanic here. There is another very genuine complaint which even I have most of the time, that why all the people who talk about films talk only about Hollywood films, or not Indian films. Now there is one very obvious reason for that, is first of all, not much. I'm not saying not at all. I'm saying not much has been written in terms of Indian films. There are some classic films on which you have a lot of books written about the film, like Mughal-e-Azam is one of them, Mother India is another film, and then you have critical analysis or critical discourse about the decade, about the style, about the genre, in India. Now sometimes it becomes compulsory, because you understand, you study critical analysis also, you study different film theories also, and we have been the user of different film theories. If I there are very few examples. Like as today I was talking about in my class, that why there was a need for parallel cinema, and why it was at all born, what happened in the 80s, though we have discussed that a lot in during CEC videos only. But when it comes to example, when it comes to discussing about film, they are comparatively, there is nothing wrong in saying they are more organized in terms of writing. They are more organized. They take cinema as studies very seriously, and that becomes one of the reasons to bring up with examples like, so you have like, I don't remember when somebody discussed thoroughly Tumbad at all in some academic paper. Maybe it was for the sake of paper, but how it was different. Do you critically analyze that film? There are good discussions happening around that film, but when it comes to putting it in hook, putting it in plot point one, turning point one, or set up all these things from this angle, there is very less discussion. That's why I have brought this particular film. Now, so the plot turn one says that when Ross is so fed up with her own life, wants to commit suicide, there is where Jack, the protagonist, so there is a male protagonist, there is a female protagonist, so he comes to rescue, not literally that there is a rescue, he engages her in conversation, and she drops her plan to commit suicide. Now, in terms of pinch, now how, I always say pinch is where the crisis is, and plot is where plot turns are where the opportunity is. Now, both Carl and Ruth are opposed to Rose being friend with Jack. Jack initially tries to dissuade Jack. Rose initially tried to dissuade Jack, but she eventually realizes that she has feeling for him. Now, in terms of midpoint, now look at where the midpoint is happening, and midpoint is always important in terms of, if you remember, I gave you an example of Bahubali, I gave you an example of Three Idiots. There are some examples that I have quoted very well. And then now in terms of midpoint, now Jack has Rose pose while she wears only the diamond necklace, so he may draw her. Rose and Jack had an intimate night together. The two later see the ship collide into an iceberg. Now they so this becomes the midpoint, like the audience who was waiting for this, because this is, if I say Titanic, the response is it sank. Now, when you go and watch a film, it is sinking after almost 1 hour. Now, what you were doing for 1 hour, that is where the director and the writing plays its part. So now, in terms of once it is collided with the iceberg, now the pinch starts. Now, what is the pinch? Rose and Jack wants to alert everyone quickly. Obviously, that will be a very obvious reaction. Now, if it is an obvious reaction in terms of writing, now something like, suppose there is a scene where you eat a banana and throw the peel of it, and there is a person who is coming. Now you show this skin of banana and the person who is coming. Now you naturally know that if this person has a contact with this banana skin, he or she will fall. Now this is absolutely expected, but the writing or direction, here is where it plays a very crucial role. If you can make something other than slip in that particular situation, you can make it romantic, you can make it suspense, you can make it action, you can make anything. But when you do anything more than what the audience is expecting, there is where the magic happens, and there is where as an audience you would like to connect more with the film. Look, in terms of writing, I always say that it's a very it's a chase. Like suppose at times it happens that audience know what exactly going to happen on screen, and when they predict and that happens, they feel very pleased. Oh, I was able to guess. This is something that I already knew. But if you let them win for a time or two, and then when they are predicting for the third scene, and there is where you surpass their expectations, chances are that they will be flabbergasted, and rightfully so. Now, that's why in terms when it becomes writing, when it comes to writing about writing a film, I always say it's a chase game. Sometimes you put audience ahead of you, and sometimes when audience is expecting, you go beyond their expectation and surprise them. Now, obviously there is a collision with the iceberg. Now what will happen, as Rose and Jack has seen that collision, now they will automatically rush to the captain or the concerned person, telling them that, look, this is what has happened, and please take care of it. But as they were about to do it, which is very genuinely expected in terms of writing, suddenly Carl stops them. Now Carl sets Jack up by secretly putting that diamond necklace in his pocket. Now Jack is taken into custody and locked down in the sinking ship's lower deck. Now, as an audience, you were expecting that the captain will be informed, and then some mechanism will be there in place, and people will be evacuated, and there will be as less as possible collateral damage in terms of ship. But it does not happen. This is what audience was expecting. Rather, you give a twist that before they could have informed people, you put Jack in the custody. Now this is something, now in the mind of audience, it is going, look, there is a ship which is sinking. What are you doing? Why are you busy in such petty issues? But in terms of narrative, that becomes a point that actually becomes responsible for the entire ship to sink. Now this may have happened or this may not have happened. Please understand, at the end of the day, we know that there was a ship, Titanic, which sank. But it gives you one imaginary reason, not actual fact. It gives you one of the imaginary reason that yes, it was a very advanced ship when it came. It should have had a lot of mechanism of preventing the incident of this sort, but it did not happen, or the prevention work could not reach up to the height as it should have reached. It should have saved more people. These many people should not have died. Maybe this was one of the reasons. So you bring the reality of maybe not so real thing close to reality, and you make it happen, you make it believable. That is what is created in cinema, believability. Now in terms of plot turn 2, which is like grasping victory from the jaws of defeat, Rose goes down to free Jack from where he is locked. Now Carl tries to stop Rose and Jack, but finally gives up. To save him, Carl poses as a father of a lost child. He comes on board in a lifeboat and encompasses from the sinking ship. We'll be talking about it more. Thank you very much.